Hello again, and welcome to breakout session number 3 on track 1. As you may have noticed, our products look and behave very differently than the things that have come before. This is no accident. Much like Apple, we care deeply about user experience, delivering products that people can actually use to help them with their work. Here today to talk about how we do design at Palantir are Michael Lopp and Dan Cervelli. Michael Lopp is an interesting character. Born and bred in the Santa Cruz Mountains, he's one of Silicon Valley's native sons. His career has included stints at Netscape and Apple, and as an engineer and later as a senior manager. He has made a name for himself as an author, now twice published with his tomes Managing Humans, Biting and Humorous Tales of a Software Engineering Manager, and Being Geek, the Software Developer's Career Handbook, both collections of writings from his internet-famous blog, randsandrepose.com. Coming to Palantir from Apple, Michael has brought a wealth of knowledge and passion about designing innovative products that delight and help users. To that end, I've seen few people get quite as excited as Michael does about topography. Dan Cervelli is a senior software engineer on the Palantir government team. He's a prolific coder who brings an infectious drive and passion around creating great user interface to our engineering team. Dan has been responsible for large parts of the Palantir Maps application, the Object Explorer interface, and is the driving force behind the new home application that we've seen a few times today. It turns out that Dan also has the best job in America, as featured last year on CNN's Money blog. There, he was quoted as saying, "I put together apps people actually use, so for me, the greatest joy comes from seeing people use the product in a way that makes their life better or makes it easier for them to do their job." Please join me in welcoming Michael Lopp and Dan Cervelli to the stage.
Clicker? Oh, it is? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Now for something a little bit different. Okay. Water? No water? Okay, here we go. So in the corner of one of the whiteboards on one of the director's offices back in Palo Alto, it says WWSJD, question mark. And it's said this the entire time that I've worked at Palantir, which is about a year and a half now. And it's near and dear to my heart what it actually stands for. This stands for, what would Steve Jobs do? Which is more poignant this week than it was when I started this presentation. Because unfortunately, Steve, thank you. Unfortunately, Steve Jobs passed away last week. It warms my heart working at Palantir, walking into this director's office and looking up and thinking that part of his process of making big, hard decisions, or even little, small decisions, is looking up and thinking, what would Steve do? It's near and dear to my heart because there's going to be a lot of Apple in this presentation. I apologize. Actually, it's kind of awesome. But it's near and dear to my heart because I've been at Apple. I was at Apple for about 8.5 years. I was the running part of the macOS 10 team for 5 years, and then I was running engineering for the online store. I think it would be very hard for anyone to convince me that Apple isn't a wild success over the past decade. A wild success. They are the most valuable company on the planet Earth right now. And when you think about why that is, I hope it's not just because of Steve Jobs, because that would be a problem. It's because there's an amazing engineering team. It's because they work really hard, just like a lot of the valleys and companies in the Silicon Valley. And they obviously have great technology. But the thing that ties it all together, the thing that makes Apple great, is design. This is a very hard word to define. What does design mean? I could ask all of you, and you would raise your hands, and I'm pretty sure I would get a lot of different answers. Even within the design community, there's no really standard definition about what design actually means. People nod their head and say, yes, we need to have a design-centered culture, and they usually don't know what they're talking about. Let's talk a little bit about this and get a feel for how we're applying some of these ideas inside of Palantir. The thing about design is when you start looking at the world, thinking about how things are built, which is maybe one of the definitions, the decisions, how you build a thing, you start to see interesting examples of, let's say, poor design. Here's the deal with this 3-wheeled car. You look at this and you kind of go, huh, what were they thinking there, right? But here's the thing I promise you. There is somebody on the planet Earth who thinks this is a great idea. They go, well, you know, we're saving a tire, right? and it corners amazingly well. Design failing is really easy to see. And when you start to look at things and you start to say, well, what are the decisions that actually led to us to make this product, you start to see interesting things. Here's another one. When you go to a foreign country, they say, eat the bananas because they're already wrapped inside of something, right? So someone said, hey, it's a great idea. What we're going to do here is we're going to wrap the thing that's already wrapped into something else. What were they thinking here, right? What was the design thinking? Here's a little more close to home for me. For those of you who don't know, BART is our poor excuse for a subway back in the Bay Area. And this is how you buy a ticket. Totally clear, isn't it? You just follow the numbers that go left to right in the opposite order. There's this color thing going on. It's confusing. And it's really what should be a very simple process. It should be as easy to do as it is to describe. I am going to go buy a ticket. Design is everywhere around you. You're suffering through it. You're loving it all the time. And the thing is, all of these screenshots that I'm giving you here, the thing about them is there's usually some engineer, and I'm an engineer, remember. There's some engineer behind the scenes who's got a lot of power to influence what is being built. They know the electronics, they know the software, they know the materials. And the thing about engineers that's really interesting to me is that engineers left to their own devices can do some awesome things. This is a screenshot. When I did the demo, I panicked everyone in the back. They're like, oh my God, what happened? Anyway, you've all seen this screen. You've all looked at this and gone, what the hell happened here, right? Now, I'm an engineer, and I look at this, and I'm like, oh, something happened. I'll restart, everything's fine. This thing has been dubbed, not by Microsoft, but by everybody else who's looking at it, the blue screen of, that's right, death. Do you know why it's called death? Read the first 3 lines. A fatal exception occurred. When my mom sees this screen, she thinks someone has died, right? She looks at this and she goes, oh my God, my computer is horrifically damaged forever, right? But the thing is, there was an engineer or engineers who were looking at this and saying, this is going to be a useful thing. This is something which is going to inform them and illuminate and tell them, and it's not at all. This is a bad design decision. And just to show you that I'm an equal opportunity basher, here it is on Mac OS X. You get very helpful advice about how to restart your computer in 4 different languages. But again, it's something this is a design decision that I think is bad. I would like to show you what I think is a well-designed failure. And yes, this is an Apple ad, as you're finding out. This is an iPad. You're looking at the springboard. Now you're looking at the springboard. And the springboard is just for those of you who don't, how many people have iPads here? How many people have Macs? Wait, how many people have Macs at work? Okay, and Macs at home? Interesting. All right, some work to do there. All right, so this is an iPad, and this is the springboard, and this is me not jostling it around a lot. And what I'm going to show you is an application loading up, which is another Apple ad. I'm sorry, I really swear to God, I work for Palantir. It's a lovely place. This is Safari, and I'm going to shut Safari down. And Safari's gone, right? I just shut the application down. All right, now, what I'm going to show you now is an application crashing. This is the blue screen of death on the iPad. Once I fire up Safari. You ready? I actually can't do it because it looks exactly the same as the application just shutting down. Now, the engineer in me, and I was talking with Dan about this last night, the engineer in us goes like, wait. We were dishonest with the user. Something bad happened there, right? Application, we should tell them, they should report the bug, and we can go fix and all this sort of stuff. That is the engineering mindset telling you to do something which is not necessarily great design. Someone, maybe it was Steve, I don't know, said, what we're going to do here when the application fails on the iPad is going to do the right thing for the user. That's all of you guys, right? We're going to choose a model which respects the user. Everything the engineer wants to know about like the crash and what happened there and the sequence is actually sent up to the mothership in the back channel, and they do nefarious things with it. Probably not. But the point is, we met both requests. Someone decided to focus on the user. I would say this is a good example of a well-designed failure. Water. Design, in my world, means making decisions. Sounds like a cliche. We're making decisions. The big, hard ones, which products are we going to do? Which hard problems are we going to go after? The small ones, what's the right word to use here? What's the best typography to use in this dialogue that makes it the most readable, the best reading experience? It means making decisions. How do you actually go make those decisions? Actually, before I get there, so engineers, us, Palantir, left our own devices, if we were going to go and do the path of least resistance solution about, let's say, hypothetically, putting the Palantir on the iPhone, this is what we would do if we weren't actually thinking or making decisions. We'd shove the whole damn thing in and say, look at this is great. Isn't it beautiful? This is not what we did with Palantir Mobile. We said, okay, we have a whole set of features, we have users, what are the right decisions to make for these folks to make something which is going to be useful for this platform, useful for the users. We made hard decisions about what to include and what not to include. Design means being really good at saying no. Because if you don't say no, this is where you get. This is an exaggerate. I'm ripping on Microsoft. I've been doing it for a decade. Anyway, this is Microsoft Word with every single toolbar turned on, which you would never do because that would be kind of crazy. But the thing about this is there's a lot of well-intentioned design going on here, believe it or not. I guarantee you that each of you who's used Word, and I use Word, Word's great, there's something on here that you absolutely could not live without. I absolutely need to be able to embed a Fox Pro database in my Word document. That's essential to my life. And that's what this is. This is every single feature in Word showing to the user. And if we didn't decide to choose to focus on the important things, the things that people really need to do, this is where we'd end up. This is why in Palantir you see a really clean toolbar, right? We're not trying to overload you, right? This is why in all like Mac OS 10, there's only one toolbar. They're not trying to overwhelm the users because what they've done is they've decided to go and make decisions about what the user needs to do. Design involves you. Palantir is not a consumer software company. You guys have really hard problems. Consumer software, you can sit there and you can get the entire problem inside of your head. It needs to be a notification engine. It needs to have these 3 features, and it needs to just be gorgeous, right? The problems that you guys are solving are massive. They're hard. They're often impossible to solve, and we need to work with you to actually go and build a model, to figure out a vision, to figure out a design that's going to make sense, that we can make these decisions for you. Great design isn't about making decisions for the users. It's about making those decisions irrelevant. You should be sitting down at the software and not seeing it. You should be doing it is whatever, you should be sitting down and doing whatever it is that you do. And there's a lot of you out there with a lot of hard problems. So, last Apple screenshot, I swear. There are two users at Apple. There's really kind of the consumer user, which is a person who just needs my wife is a great example of this. Just sits there, just wants to get the photos in. She's in and out, she's done. This is the consumer. The other half of the user is what they call prosumer, which is the higher end. This is Aperture. This is their high-end photography editing program. And these are two very different people. Obviously, the Aperture users are people that want a lot more knobs and dials, a little bit more sophistication. The thing about Palantir that's really both awesome and hard is we need to be able to speak to the entire spectrum of experience, from the folks that want all the knobs and dials to the folks who just want to get in and get out and get the job done. We have to speak to all of them. We can't segment. One product needs to serve all of these folks. What we need to do, and as an introduction into Dan, is we need to understand, great design means understanding what the user wants. What do you want? All of you, right? Prioritizing, focusing, and expertly describing that via a model, which is what we built, as you'll see in a second. A model gives us a vision. A vision allows us to say, is this more important than that, as opposed to giving you another toolbar full of all of the different options. And the thing that's really want to do, and this is the thing that I think Apple is really good at, is we want to exceed your expectations, right? It's enterprise software, but it doesn't mean that we can't figure out how to surprise and delight you when you're sitting down and using the product. So to give you a little example of this, Dan Cervelli is going to come up and show you how we've walked through and used some of this thinking on one of Palantir's features.
Thanks. So we'll try to switch over to more of a Palantir infomercial instead of Apple. Okay, I'm going to start off with a little quote here. So we recently had a training with the Marine 2nd Expeditionary Force before they deployed to Afghanistan. And one of the questions in the questionnaire post-training was, would you recommend Palantir to other service members? And I'm just going to read you a couple of their answers here. They've been excerpted. Yes, its usability far exceeds our current platforms. Great, okay. Yeah, it's very simple to use. Yes, I would recommend it. The program is far more user-friendly and easy to understand than I anticipated. It's like, this is really good. I mean, this, as someone who works on this product, I'm proud of these quotes. But we actually feel like we can do a lot better. And what I want to do is show you a little bit, a story of me as an engineer learning about these principles that Michael's just talked about and applying them to developing a new feature in Palantir. So let's take a look at Palantir as it stands right today. This is a screenshot that a sophisticated user might put together, doing some analysis on the graph, doing some searching, using some of our analysis tools. But what does it take to get to this point, right? So the project I was given was called Walk-Up Usability. Bob McGrew talked about it a little bit earlier in the session. And when I was given it, the direction was, we need the product to be more walk-up usable. That's it. You know, I've been at the company for about 4 years, which is a pretty long time in Palantir time. And the projects I've worked on have typically had a much clearer direction. You know, like we need geospatial analysis. We need a map application that can read standard vector formats and you know, put points on a map, right? It's like, you know when you've done a good job and it's ready, right? With this one, I didn't even know what they meant, right? What is this walk-up usability business? So basically, I had to sort of figure out this design thing, and I had a lot of help along the way. But the first thing I wanted to do was, well, they're talking about walk-up usability. What does a user see when they first log into the application? And this is it. It's kind of a blank slate, right? If I haven't had any training, then there's really no chance that I'm going to know what to do at this point. You know, unlike Microsoft Word, where you start up and you get a blank slate, at least you're actually trying to write on that blank slate, so that makes some sense. Here, you've got no real direction. So, you know, the training that's required to get someone to here is, you know, it takes a fair amount of time. And that's time that, you know, the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force or, you know, any of you guys don't have. And it's time that, frankly, Palantir doesn't, you know, if we can make the training burden lower, that's great for us too, right? So what I had to do as an engineer, which I wasn't really used to, was build this model that Michael's talking about for how to make decisions that will allow us to make the products more approachable. So I went into the field and I talked to users. I talked to our forward deployed engineers. I asked questions like, why do some people adopt Palantir more quickly than others? You know, how did your power users become power users? What features do people struggle with? Which features do people really like? Show me your workflow. You know, and you know, I talked to a lot of different people. Most people were really happy to speak to me, and that was great. And we ended up amassing, you know, a lot of data about this problem. So from here, we had to decide what it is we should work on. And to do that, you have to have a model for how people are going to use the application. And what we found was that when you're starting to do some analysis in Palantir or really anywhere, you have to start somewhere. And that starting place is some form of search, right? Either you're searching for a person that you're interested in, a geographic area, you know, an IP address, a phone number, whatever it is in your domain. Once you get that information, if it's, you know, Palantir works with both structured and unstructured data, and if that data comes back in the form of an unstructured document, you're going to have to tag it, because ultimately we're going to get to analysis here, and we need some structure to the data to perform this analysis. So after we've tagged it, we can get on to this analysis, which is sort of the Palantir bread and butter. We've got network analysis, geospatial analysis, temporal, the histogram, and a lot of custom solutions like you've seen at your individual deployments. But ultimately, the purpose of analysis is to come up with some tidbit of information that's worthy of disseminating or reporting on, right? So the last piece of the puzzle is reporting. This might be an email to a colleague, a target information package for an operation, something like that. Whatever it is, it's deployment specific. So we call this framework STAR, right? Search, tag, analyze, report, and it's a very linear flow. But in reality, people don't necessarily work with this linear flow, right? They have what we call the workflow piece, right? If you're about to go out on a foot patrol or something like that, you may just want to do a few searches, rudimentary analysis, quick report, move on, no tagging, right? Or maybe you're at a fob and you're just doing nothing but tagging new intel reports, so you're just doing tag, tag, tag. Or hopefully you've generated some useful insight through analysis that you want to go back in the workflow and do more searching with, right? So basically you can navigate this workflow, navigate through this STAR structure in many different ways, right? So we sort of identified these as like 5 particular areas we could work on in the application to make it more walk-up usable. And the question becomes, where do you start? So we sort of narrowed it down quickly to searching and tagging, searching being the obvious one because it's the first thing in this linear flow, and tagging because it frankly takes a lot of time and it's very important in order to do the analysis that's required further down the road. We also talked about workflow and reporting, and we realized basically we want to work on all 5 of these things, and we will, but we've got to start somewhere. So how do we decide between searching, working on search and working on tagging? And this, for me as an engineer, was a very big change, right? I'm used to measuring my days and how much code I've written or how many bugs I've fixed or whatever, and stopping that process and pulling out tools like Adobe Illustrator or whatever to make mock-ups or prototypes is pretty foreign to me. But it's this thought process and learning how to be a designer as well as just an engineer. So on the left there are some prototypes for a new search interface, which ultimately is what we worked on. And on the right is some sort of prototype-y, kind of hand-wavy, a new tagging interface that we also have prototyped, which we'll hopefully work on soon. So went back into the field with these drawings, these prototypes, these mock-ups rather, and I asked people, would you prefer we work on this or that? And the response was pretty overwhelmingly for us to be working on search. So that was a pretty clear signal. Combined with it being the first thing in the STAR workflow, it made sense for us to work on it. So let's see, search. We actually do search in Palantir. We do a lot of it, in fact. We do doc search, and geo search, and filter search, and quick search, and investigation search, and graph search. The problem here is that we're very quickly coming to this slide that we saw earlier. It's like, whoa, hold on, you want me to add more search capabilities? What are we going to do to ensure that we don't end up here, right? And the answer to that question is we're going to apply the thinking, this design thinking that Michael's talking about, right? We're going to ask, how does this new feature get us through this workflow? And what old features can we remove that will be supplanted by this workflow? So that was the goal, is like being cognizant of this and still adding a feature it's actually, as you'll see, you have to really think about every piece of that feature. So this is where we started, right? This is our login screen for our first-time user. And this is where we've ended up with the creation of what we call the home application. So hopefully you think, well, that looks kind of like Google, which is actually exactly what we want you to think, because Google is basically the easiest search engine to use, right? There's a single box. You can't screw it up. And what we wanted here was a single box with an orange outline around it, enter search terms. I mean, it's very clear what the call to action is here for a user who's never used Palantir before. But we also got a clear signal from people in the field that if Palantir didn't have the data necessary to do my job, then I can't use it, flat out, it's game over, right? So those icons, in fact, everything on the screen is really designed to make the user comfortable with starting to use Palantir. So these icons are meant to represent what data is available in your system so that that fear that Palantir doesn't have the data you need is gotten around, and that person proceeds with the search. The bar in the bottom, it's almost immaterial because most people won't even read that far. But it's sort of, it's important in that it addresses the other end of the spectrum who we can't abandon, right, when we're working on these features. The more established user may not want to do a search immediately. They may want to jump to a previous investigation or read their feeds, and this is that link to those things so that they can quickly get to them. So once a search is done, we get our results. Again, you saw these similar slides this morning. They're similar to Google, except the preview is a little more interactive. And there's a couple interesting things here. The results are ordered in such a way to show entities and events that have been brought into the system either through tagging or structured import, which indicates that an actual human user was interested in them, which is very important in terms of analytical value, right? And the real point there, though, is everything, every piece of this has been thought through and a decision was made, right? Like the 3 little buttons underneath the search field. You can sort of just think, well, I've seen a lot of search interfaces that have buttons all over them. What's the big deal? Well, I can tell you that we fought a lot about those buttons, right? Should you have to click the link to get to those buttons, or should they be out there? Should they be on the left side, or should they be there? And, honestly, we haven't answered all these questions. Here's a screenshot of the most recent cut of this feature from the day before I left yesterday or 2 days ago. And we're changing the color scheme. We've changed the way the thing on the left works. And the reason is very simple. We want to keep pushing the bar lower in terms of having people's understanding of the product. And we found that the interface from the previous screen was a little bit confusing on the left. And then at the bottom is our way to move the user further down that star workflow, right? We want them to take these results and drag them to the bottom and then hit that button in the lower right, which is going to take them to the folder in the browser so that they can start tagging, right? It all comes back to how does this feature fit into that model that we have developed because we've done the research talking to you guys in the field. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michael, and he'll close it up.
Thank you, Dan. What I love about the star workflow is what I love about Palantir, which is when someone's sitting down and really good at using Palantir, what they're doing is really kind of a very creative process. What they're doing is they have this thought, right? This doesn't quite add up to me. I don't know what's going on. What's wrong with this piece of data here? And then they chase it, right? And everybody chases their thoughts differently, right? How am I going to go build up this thesis about this thought that I'm chasing, right? And star, it's just a model, right? It doesn't describe everything, but what it does is it kind of gives us a way to think about how people chase thoughts inside of Palantir. When you start off trying to solve a problem, I'm going to quote them, the whole thing. The first solutions you come up with are very complex. Speaking as an engineer, we do this. We go and we say, oh, I've solved the problem, and I fall in love with it, right? Because I solved it, right? Most people stop there when they solve the problem. But if you keep going and you live with the problem and peel away more layers of the onion, you can often arrive at some very elegant and simple solutions. This is what we need to be doing at Palantir. This is what we've started to do with Star, and we're going to keep on pushing it. The idea is you guys are living with these hard problems, right? Again, we're not a consumer software problem. There's a huge amount of telemetry that we need to do to continue to build all of the different models to understand how we're going to do well-designed software. And we're just getting started. And I'm really looking forward to, hopefully, standing up here on stage with you next year, talking about all the innovative things that we've done, working with you to design better software. Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of questions, if you have any questions. I can't see anywhere in the back row, so someone's going to have to start talking. No questions? Are we good? Oh, here comes someone.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's fantastic. I was just wondering if you had put any thought into automatic tagging, using all the knowledge of how people have tagged manually to try to help that process, which I think is perhaps one of the more cumbersome parts.
Yeah, so working on the tagging piece of the star workflow is a huge priority for us, and we have several different avenues we're going to pursue, right? As you identified, using people's existing knowledge of those tags is very valuable, and we've actually developed some back-end technologies, some machine learning algorithms that will take the knowledge that's contained in your Palantir investigation, in the whole Palantir repository, and apply that to individual pieces of document text that people are highlighting. So, a trivial example would be it could learn that an IP address consists of somewhere between 4 and 12 numbers with a number of decimal points, and it would just learn that sort of automatically, or it would learn about enumerated values for different terrorist organizations in Afghanistan or something like that. So that's one avenue, sort of the machine learning approach, and that is, well, I don't necessarily want to say when that ships or whatever, but that's something we're working on. And then the other one is, how do we actually just speed up the whole tagging workflow? And we have lots of ideas on this, and it's something I think we're going to work on soon.
Anyone else? Yeah. Here comes your mic.
From Mike.
Yes, walk-up usability, I see that that's a great idea and looks fantastic.
Thank you.
And it really, I think, from my perspective, is for, as we talked about this morning, the novice, and it's from the perspective of the novice analyst.
Yeah.
I want to know if there's any thought in taking Palantir from a UI perspective in a direction that is maybe for the unsophisticated user that's not an analyst.
Yeah, so there's a couple different things to say to that. So first of all, the home application is very customizable. So the actual results and the previews can be customized on a per type basis without getting into too many gory details. And what this means is that you could actually make a version of the application that had nothing but the home application and maybe the browser, and would pull up, let's just use a local law enforcement context. It would say, if you got an arrest, you would open the arrest, you'd see a preview, and it would be the person, the victim, the arresting officer, maybe where the arrest occurred. Everything that you really care about as someone who just needs a little bit of background information, right? Another avenue is Palantir Web, right? We do have a web version, and we are talking about having I believe we have a REST API as well, upon which we could build, basically, you could build anything on top of a good, clean API, right? Does that sort of answer your question? Cool.
Good? All right.
All right.
We'll be up here if you have any other questions. You don't want to stand in front of anyone and ask us questions. So
Yeah.
thank you very much, guys.
All right.
Good job.